Hello and welcome to today's class on understanding geography with diagrams. Today we'll be discussing about the population composition. Now when I say population composition, literally it means that a population which could be composed of people belonging to different race, belonging to different language, belonging to different religion, belonging to different age, belonging to different sex. But in this consideration, we will be taking into account the population, basically population composition with respect to age and sex. The age and sex of the population is determined by the factors such as your fertility, mortality, last but not least is your migration. For the analysis of the population composition, we are basically using this age sex pyramid. This is your age sex pyramid. This is nothing but a graphical diagram which represents the age in the horizontal category, that is the old, mature and young. In the vertical category, it represents the sex, that is your male and the female sex. Now, remember that these two diagrams are not drawn in separate manner, rather they are drawn in one composite manner. How we represent this diagram, we will be looking at further in our course. But prior to that, now the age sex pyramid is divided into two categories. Now the analysis of the population composition, we are using the age sex pyramid, and the age sex pyramid is again we are dividing it into number one is your developing category and the developed category. What is the developing and developed? It's nothing but the developing countries and the developed country. That is how is the age sex pyramid with respect to the developing and the developed country. Let us start from your developing world cohort. What is this cohort? Cohort means nothing but your group. Now the developing world countries are in a group. We can say that if we group a developing world country, then we can say China, India, Nigeria. These are the group of developing world countries. Now, what do we see in the developing world country? See, the age sex pyramid basically will figure it out in the diagram itself. We see that first of all, the age sex pyramid largely depicts broader profile. What is this broader profile? This is your broader profile, means a broad base. You can also write it as the age sex pyramid has a broad base. Broad base means what? Larger share of the global population. Number one, remember this. Again, it has a shorter height. This height is short. It means that lesser life expectancy. Again, also within this age sex pyramid, what we are observing, lesser female population in the old age cohort. This is your old age cohort or your old age group, and then this you can see that the female population is very low. Now why the female population is low? Basically what we see is that in the developing country in general, the sex ratio is not that good. The sex ratio is always in favor of the male when compared to the female. So obviously what would happen is that in the old age cohort, that the sex of ratio will always be dominant in the male category, whereas in the female category it would be less, as we see it over here. Next, this is further categorized into exponentially growing cohort and a stable cohort. What is this exponentially growing cohort? We'll again understand this with a diagram. See, in this exponentially growing cohort, what you can see again, the broad base. Now this broad base, what does it suggest? That the population is growing in a very rapid manner. This is basically the broad base, that what it suggests. So exponentially growing cohort, it says that represents the perfect pyramid with broad base and narrow epic. Narrow epic means the top portion is narrow, which shows that the very less population are in the old age cohort, whereas the maximum population is in the young age cohort, and also that the population is exploding. Remember that this particular diagram we will use when we would be analyzing the problems of the overpopulation, and especially overpopulation is a major problem in your developing countries. Over here we have also given the example of the Kenya, which will come under this exponentially growing cohort. Now let us understand the stable growing cohort. Just look into the diagram itself. In the stable growing cohort, what you see is that in the old age there is a considerable population, but in the matured age there is more number of population when compared to the young age. Now when a whole lot of population is in the matured age, what base or in the matured cohort, what basically it implies is that the population is growing slowly, that the population is growing slowly, or we can say that though the population is growing, we can say that the population is growing, but the growth rate is declining. Understand this. In the stable growing cohort, what we can see is that though the population is increasing, but the rate at which the population is growing is significantly declining. Why? See, we'll read the statement first. In this pyramid, the middle age cohort has grown significantly, as we have already discussed, showing the decline in fertility. What is fertility? Like we had mentioned earlier, fertility is nothing but the number of birth given by the women during her reproductive age until and unless she establishes the menopause or she reaches the age of menopause. Next, though population is increasing, but the growth rate has declined. This is what we got from the diagram. Hence, basically draw this diagram and analyze this diagram. Simple. No need to remember anything or mug up anything. Understand this diagram more than enough. Next, let's move to the developed world cohort. In this developed world cohort, again we'll look into this diagram. Now, in this diagram, what we can see, first we are looking at that the entire pyramid is a taller pyramid. Taller pyramid means what? We have a higher life expectancy. But what was the case for a developing world cohort? In the developing world cohort, the pyramid height was very less, which showed that it had less life expectancy. Similarly, we can see a narrow profile. This base is very narrow. It means that the share of population is also very low. But in case of the developing world, what we saw, the profile was very, very wide. Hence, the population was high over there. Now let's analyze the statement. The developed world cohort reveals narrow profile. Yes, we have explained this. Depicting lesser share of the population growth. Yes, we have explained this. Which are significantly tall, representing higher life expectancy. Again, one thing that we see over here, that there are more number of female in the old age cohort. Now, why is there more number of female in the old age cohort? Now, basically, if we look into the developed countries, what we see is that the sex ratio is favorable, means the number of female are more when compared to the number of male. Hence, the number of female would be higher in case of your old age cohort, because not just is the sex ratio that is favorable, but it is also that the women's are lesser vulnerable to the old age diseases. Now, from this also, what you can analyze is that the healthcare condition of the women in the developing countries versus the developed countries in the old age. So what we understand is that in the old age, especially in the developing countries, women of old age of 60 and above are more vulnerable to diseases. But this is the reverse in case of the developed countries, where male are more vulnerable to such diseases and women are less vulnerable to such diseases. As a result, the women population in the old age cohort is more. Next, again in this category we have two well-defined categories. Let us understand. First is that the stable population cohort. This is your stable population cohort. It means that there is a significant number of old age population, and from that old age population we have more number of this middle age population, and we have significant amount of young age population. Again this is the narrow base, again this is the tall height. So example is your Austria. Let's read the statement. It incorporates near absolute balance of the population in all age cohort. In every age cohort there is a balanced population. Now let's look into the declining population. Now the declining population represents an inverted pyramid. What does this inverted pyramid means? The inverted pyramid simply means that number of people in the old age is more than the number of people in the matured and young age. And what is the biggest demerit of such? The biggest demerit is that the countries that are having such declining population or that are represented by such kind of pyramid are basically facing depopulation. Depopulation means their population is growing, or its population is not growing in the manner that it should grow. Rather, we can also say that the fertility rate has reached at 1.8 and less, which is below the replacement level. Understand this, that the fertility rate is below the replacement level. Hence, what is happening is that these countries are suffering from depopulation. Sweden is one category. We also do have Japan. We also do have your France. We also do have your Germany and many other. Next, it is the analysis of this population composition that helps in analyzing the nature of the demographic dividend. Yes, if you what does demographic dividend means? Demographic dividend means you have a working age population more than your dependent age population. The working age population is the age from 15 to 59. This is your working age population, and they are more than your dependent age population. What is the dependent age population? Again, it's 0 to 15, and another, this is above 60. Simple. Next, again, it also helps in knowing your workforce. Again, it also helps in analysis of your old and the young age population, and it also helps in knowing your gender status, whether there is gender equality or there is gender inequality. Simple. We will be using these diagrams basically when we would be discussing your population problems. That will be all for today's class. Thank you.